Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor, right through the door.
Man, what a snappy tune. Kind of surprised they didn't bring it back for the remake. Oh. Maybe that's why. Yes, we're here for the Blob, a most crafty and visceral bit of lunacy that deserves to have its moment in the moonlight. If you haven't seen it in a while, or Blob forbid, never seen it at all, this best horror movie you never saw ought to grease your wheels and get you in the mood for some good old-fashioned monster movie mayhem. Who'd have thought that someone could have taken the massively goofy, lovably cheesy 1958 film, The Blob, and make it cool, scary, gory, and enjoyable as hell for the 80s? And who'd have thought The Blob was worth remaking at all? Not unlike The Fly, which came out 2 years prior, The Blob remake has no business being so badass. And while not as filled with surprising pathos as the Cronenberg movie, it's no less ooey gooey and grotesque. A masterclass in body horror, shocking visual effects, and, most important, confident filmmaking. Surely you know the story, but we'll give you an obligatory recap. After all, it really isn't too complicated. A meteorite carrying some very gruesome cargo descends upon a tight-knit small town, with said cargo quickly announcing its intentions. It's there to kill any and every one in its path. We take a little time first to meet the likable folks of Arborville, with a focus on some of the high school kids, particularly high school jock Paul Taylor and his cheerleader girlfriend Meg. Lurking around the edges is bad boy Brian Flagg, a rebel without a cause whose don't give a shit attitude predictably masks a heart of gold. All these folks will soon get wind of the Blob's presence in a big way, and the ones who haven't already became Blob Chow will have to figure out a way to stop the monstrous slime ball. Interestingly, one of the original film's producers, Jack Harris, was a producer on this one, and the film was released exactly 30 years after its forebear. While it wasn't exactly a box office hit, especially considering its budget, which was rumored to be anywhere between $10 and $20 million, not a small sum for a horror picture, but of course, the film made an indelible impression on those who've seen it throughout the years, which is the reason we're shining a light on the slippery bastard. Directed by Chuck Russell, coming out of the terrific Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, the film was written by Russell and Frank Darabont, who, before making grown men cry with Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, was creeping people out with screenplays for this, Elm Street 3, and The Fly 2. Of course, he later returned to horror roots with The Mist. God damn you for that ending, Frank. And The Walking Dead. With The Blob, Frank and Chuck are obviously having a blast playing around with old movie tropes and turning this picturesque little town into a blood-soaked mess. Diners, the movies, Makeout Point, and other hallmarks of any town, USA, are turned into places of unrelenting blob-related carnage, with the events culminating in a final standoff where what remains of the town's population barricades itself into, you guessed it, the town hall. And though, of course, it had been updated for a modern audience, the Blob had plenty of amiable old-school charm running through its veins. The lead is a leather jacket-wearing, motorcycle-riding anti-hero straight out of a 50s exploitation movie. There's small-town atmosphere in abundance, that picture-perfect sense of Americana the television was always throwing at people back in the day, Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith, etc. And then there's the bizarre, unfathomable monster causing all kinds of destruction and despair. They really don't make them like this anymore, and that is a damn shame, because the world needs more Blob-type villains on the big screen. And no, we're not talking about this guy. Kevin Dillon ably takes the lead as Brian Flagg, full of greasy charisma and a perfect opposite to squeaky clean good girl Meg, played by Shawnee Smith. These two alone should alert you to the film's stature as a true 80s essential. Their hairspray budget alone must have been quite substantial. Also very 80s is the presence of Donovan Leitch as Paul, although he is then and now best known as being the son of Donovan. The whole ensemble is made up of recognizable character actors from the decade, everyone more or less perfectly cast in this bona fide horror classic. One of the most startling aspects of this movie is its gleeful willingness to kill off characters left and right, and yes, here come the spoilers. First off, there's Paul, and while he's not necessarily a dude we want to spend the whole movie with, he is presented as a decent enough bro who appears for all the world like our bland white dude hero, picking up where a young Steve McQueen left off the first time. About 20 minutes in, the movie announces, nope, this poor guy is gonna get a most uncomfortable looking send-off. It's like if Psycho had killed Janet Leigh by melting her skin right off. Sort of. Anyhow, bye Paul. Hope that didn't hurt too much. Then there's the town sheriff, Herb Geller, played by future Darabont fave Jeffrey DeMunn. Herb is developing a cute little romance with good-natured waitress Fran, who is played by Candy Clark, best known for playing another small-town girl in American Graffiti. How could you not root for these two to make it through this otherworldly ordeal and walk off into the sunset together? Or at the very least, to make it to the third act. Nope, the movie is gonna kill the sheriff off screen, then show us and his gal pal his horribly mutated corpse right before crushing the nice lady to death in a phone booth. The Blob gives no fucks. Of course, the movie kills plenty of people who need some killing. One surprising casualty is Eddie, a bratty little kid who won't really be missed. Sure, he's a nosebleed, but he's a little kid for crying out loud. And the Blob not only grabs him, but it makes sure to toy with the poor runt at first. Just brutal. Then there's Meadows, the ice-cold lead scientist on the case. In true sci-fi horror fashion, the government is responsible for the Blob and aim to use it as a biological weapon. Because yeah, in any logical world, using a giant pile of goo is the best way to defeat your enemies. But whatever, Meadows is willing to let innocent folks die in order to secure his prize, so you just know he's gonna bite it in a big way. That can't be good for the skin. And what about Deputy Briggs? He's a typical get off my lawn type, pretty much a douche throughout, until he finally proves somewhat helpful towards the end. But it's too little, too late for the copper who goes out with a real bang. Or crack. Side note, in 2 straight years, Paul McCann had 2 of the most badass deaths of 80s cinema. There should be an honorary Oscar for that. No doubt the standout sequence sees an unlucky feller put his hand where it doesn't belong, and well, this changed the way most of us looked at plumbing forever. You really have to hand it to the special effects department, as the deaths in this movie are genuinely gruesome and completely awesome. Even by today's standards, they're tremendous. Even more so considering there's no CGI being used to bolster the various skin meltings on display. If you watched this movie as a kid, it was both thrilling and disgusting to behold such a blast. Ultimately, the most dramatic death belongs to the Blob itself, killed by a snowmaking machine. Pretty humiliating defeat overall, but every villain has his weakness. What's especially cool about this finale is that Meg proves to be more of a badass than anyone else, though Brian's efforts should not be discounted. Together, they make a terrific team, and if the film had been more of a success, perhaps we would have seen what a long-term Brian and Meg relationship might look like, in addition to what shenanigans the eventually unfrozen Blob had in store. Alas, it was not to be, and the only Blob sequel we ever got was this one, in 1972. But the Blob lives on in our hearts, minds, and skin. It's lovable, yet nasty, ghastly, yet strangely comforting. A smart B-movie that knows exactly what it is and oozes with style and attitude. And okay, it doesn't have a catchy theme song as its predecessor did, but it does feature a pretty killer end credits tune from a hair metal band called Alien, no less. Take us out, boys. And folks, think twice about getting too close to your drains.